we light this flame, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, humbled by all that we cannot fathom in this time. We come into the presence of what we do know, perhaps the only thing we ever can know, that love is now and forever the only answer to everything and everyone in every moment. Thanks. I'm going to draw on the seasoned Unitarian Universalists who will know the doxology even as it is not in the program. I'm looking to all of you. We haven't sung that in a while in this congregation, but it is in our history and it's in Dick's memory. Bill will play one time through to just remind us, and then as you're able, please join in the singing. Well done, friends. Well done. Hopefully you sung the right UU words. We are in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. I thank our final row. You really gave us courage. Well, good afternoon. It is, of course, with great sadness, but also enormous gratitude that we are given the opportunity to grieve the loss of Dick Cogger and to celebrate his life here in a place that meant so much to him and his family. A lifelong Unitarian who, along with his wife, Mary Paul, have given so much to our congregation over many years. We gather this day to especially give our care to Mary Paul and her daughter Jane, and extended family who have traveled from near and far. Please give them your prayers as they try to get to Syracuse for flights on Monday. But how wonderful you got here safe and sound. A special welcome also to friends. Friends of this congregation of years ago have traveled here as well, especially amidst this unpredictable winter we have been enduring this winter in Ithaca. My friends, though Alzheimer's may have shaped Dick's final years, it does not define his story. His essence, his deep, inquisitive, and adventurous spirit, we'll hear a little bit of that later. His historic attitude, and this is how I think of Dick, I can fix almost anything if just given the time and focus. That spirit remains with us. In this Unitarian Universalist tradition, we affirm the sacredness of every life and the enduring power of love. We hold space for grief and gratitude this day, for sorrow, but most of all, a celebration of a life lived well, ethically engaged. As friends and family who knew Dick well, help us all in this hour to not only remember Dick's challenges and their family in those final years, but as the whole person that has always been, remembering his joys, his many accomplishments, contributions, and the deep connections he formed with so many of you here gathered this day. May we all find comfort in knowing that love is never lost. It lives on in memory, in the stories we share and will share this day, and in the ways we carry forth the light he brought into our shared world. Please rise as you are able to join in our singing of our first hymn found in your gray hymnal in front of you. Number 17, Every Day and Every Morn, and again, Bill will help us to remember the melody before singing. Thank you. Be seated.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Susan Cogger Williams, Dick's kid sister, his only sister. He was 8 years older than me, and of course I always looked up to him. You no doubt know that Dick had many interests and many gifts. For me, his greatest gift was as a teacher. Sure, he entirely rebuilt his Morgan sports car in our driveway. He played tennis like a pro. He created art with his photography. He built anything out of wood, even guitars, but he loved to share how to do those things, and he was terrific at it. For me, we connected through his eagerness to explain how things work or the process to make things. For example, when I was 9 or 10, I wanted to play records on his hi-fi, the one he built, of course. So he said I could, but only after he showed me exactly how to handle the records, get them out of the sleeve, place the needle on the record. I still handle records that way today if I ever handle them, but no one else I know goes to such pains. He always developed a specific method for doing anything, the best, most efficient method, and he wanted to share that. I might not have always agreed with him, but frankly, he often did have the best method or technique. He introduced me to his passion for reading when I was in junior high, especially science fiction. It was great because he collected all the books in a series, so it was like having a library at home. And every time I'd visit Ithaca, he'd share a new favorite author. Here, read this one. My favorite was, and still is, Lois McMaster Bujold, and Mary passed along his collection of books of hers to me. When I was in high school, he was working at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, close to Detroit. He would pick me up on Sundays to go skiing. I wanted to live up to his expectations, so I wouldn't go into the chalet, no matter how cold I was, until he went in. And I never enjoyed skiing as much as I did that winter when he was teaching me how to ski. He used to come and stay with me in New York City when he went to the US Open at Forest Hills, which he did for a number of years. He'd show me how to use his latest calculator or the camera that he had with him. On visits to Ithaca, he taught me how to develop and print my photos in his darkroom. And when I was looking to buy a computer, I of course called Dick for his advice, and he sold me on an Apple computer, no surprise, and I'm still all Apple all the time. Not everything he inspired me to try took. For example, when his then wife Allison upgraded her bike, they gave me her touring bike, a Louison Bobet with more gears than I knew a bike could have. The first time I rode it at college, I fell going over the railroad tracks and still have the scars to show for it. I sold that bike. One of the things you might not know is that Dick was a terrific cook. One memorable occasion was in Florida, where our mom had lived. We all stayed on Clearwater Beach, Dick, Mary, Jane, Sky, my wife Terry, and our son Andrew. Dick had a plan for dinner, so we made a trip to the fish market. He picked out a fish we'd never heard of, and then he used spices he brought with him to grill it for us. Even the girls, who only ate mac and cheese at that time, enjoyed that meal. To this day, I have recipes handwritten by him that I often use. When I was about 13, I overheard Mom on the phone telling our aunt, "Susan thinks the sun rises and sets in her brother." She wasn't far off. I'll miss him, but he'll continue to inspire me as I try new things and expand my horizons.
first met Dick in 2009 when I was teaching flamenco guitar lessons here in Fall Creek, actually. He came to me for a lesson and he brought with him a guitar that he had made. When I was in high school, I had plans and outlines for a guitar drawn up and sitting under my bed, but I never had the wherewithal to get the tools or the materials I needed to follow through with actually building one. So I was very interested in the fact that Dick was making guitars. For the next lesson, I came to Dick and Mary Paul's house so I could check out the workshop. Dick told me how much money he had put into the workshop, and I said, "Wow, you must be building a lot of guitars here." He replied, "Well, the workshop mostly builds more workshop." But Dick had made quite a few very beautiful guitars. Dick was a very generous man. He actually gave away his first 10 or 12 guitars, and he gave me one of his early flamenco guitars, as I wasn't particularly happy with the instrument I'd been playing. I still wanted to build my own, though, and he was generous enough to let me use the workshop and teach me for free, only charging me for the materials I used. My first guitar took me several months to complete, and when it was finished, it was one of the most amazing feelings I had ever experienced. I stayed with Dick for 2 years before setting up my own shop, and somehow I'm still at it. I'll forever be grateful for that generosity that he showed me in helping me turn that dream of building a guitar into a reality. And I have here actually Dick's last guitar that he ever made. It was hanging up in his workshop for several years as his health was kind of declining. He wasn't able to actually finish it. So I took it to my shop and I put a finish on it and kind of did some detailing work to get it all finished and strung up. So I have the guitar and I thought I'd maybe play a little bit on it if people are interested.
Fred Balfour is the president of our Board of Trustees and a dear friend of Dick's. He unfortunately is not able to be here today, so I have his remembrance. Dick Cogger was a man of many interests, experiences, and knowledge. I was continuously surprised by the number of things he knew. The things he knew how to do and the things that he would take on. Sharon and I arrived at FUSIT around 2010. Mary Paul quickly enlisted me in backpacking installation up a 20-foot ladder to the attic over the arch room. This is not unusual for Mary Paul. They were new, they just didn't know to say no. Installing those big packages, bags of foam popcorn among the trusses. During that process, Dick came over to me and said, "Hi." We quickly asked each other, "Where did you come from?" Both from Michigan, both with lifelong interest in cars. Long conversation followed. "Where'd you grow up?" "Detroit," said Dick. "What high school?" "Cooley High," says Dick. I said, "My wife Sharon went to Cooley." Later, Dick walked over to Sharon and said, "Didn't we have a number of classes together at Cooley?" Sharon's eyes widened and she said, "Dick Cogger." "Not only that, but I was behind you in the college advisor line, and I heard her tell you that with your grades, you could have your pick of a college and expect many scholarships." Let me provide some context. Sharon and Dick were in the same school a half-continent away in 1958, 52 years earlier, and Cooley High has over 6,000 students in one high school, and they met 52 years later here in Ithaca, and they remembered each other. Over the years, Dick and I had many conversations. I'd say, "Dick, tell me where I can get my car's front end fixed." "Well, go to Five Corners to the gas station, architect by Henry Miller," well, you know, the same architect that designed FUSIT, "sit in the office there and wait out, well, a half dozen of the owner's stories, and you will get an accurate diagnosis and good service for small money." Or I'd say, "Well, Dick, what did you do at Cornell?" "Well, I helped design, install, and maintain the early campus-wide network." Wow. Then we had a long conversation about networking, email, internet. Well, you know, the conversation went on. "Well, Dick, did I hear you play the guitar?" "Yep, come on over and see my studio where I make guitars and teach people how to make their own and have stacks of aging wood for many future guitars." Visiting Dick and Mary Paul was a great experience for me, especially Dick's corner of his living room. You know, some people like their living room to look like, I don't know, like a hotel room at the Sheraton, ready for the next guest. I like a living space where I can see what people read, what instruments they play, what magazines they subscribe to, what computers and phones they use. Well, as some of you know, Dick did not disappoint in this area. You could see all these things and more, a vast array of conversation topics. But the area where Dick surprised me and excited me was in 2014. He headed up a discussion committee on policy governance and nonprofits and how it might apply to the First Unitarian Society of Ithaca. How did a person whose life revolved around computers and networks and cars and guitars, where did it all come from? An interest in organization and governance of nonprofits? He had us reading Carver's book, a challenging task in itself, I have to tell you. We were looking at bylaws and policy documents from small and large Unitarian Universalist congregations around the country. And his committee work was part of the ramp up to a partnership governance that came to fruition here in our congregation in the year 2022 to 2023. His work is still deeply felt. He ended, "I miss Dick. Mary Paul sold me Dick's 2001 I can't say it, Miata. Clearly, I don't drive really good cars, clearly. In beautiful shape, a few dings and scratches, but in perfect working order. I drive it year-round. I can actually testify to that. If there's not too much snow, he'll even do it in the winter. A practical Dick Cogger feel. And every time I get into that car and clutch into first gear, I think of Dick. A guy who knew a lot about things, who knew how to do a lot of things, and who took on things that contributed to all of us here at the First Unitarian Society of Ithaca. I miss him.
I'll get it. Yeah, thanks. I must confess, I was so busy greeting everybody that I'm distractible anyway, and I forgot to change my shoes. At least now I'm coordinated a little better. Okay. Now, okay, two fists. I think I'm, okay, stand up straight. So I'm Mary Paul. Paul's really my middle name, but I'm using it. It's sort of fun. So Dick Cogger and I first met in 1985, just because someone suggested we might have things in common. Oh shoot, I forgot to bring them. I was so busy, well, I didn't bring the items in question. Darn it. I'll describe them to you. We visited each other's workshops. Dick's was in a garage space where he had collected machines as a useful hobby. He wasn't used to having a young woman come over and be all Google-eyed over it, like, wow, what a big South Bend lathe. My shop was more of the 18th century hand tools variety, chisels and such. And I had recently brought 3 treadle lathes back from England. The largest one was not set up yet because I intended to motorize it. When Dick came over, he said it was clear that I was going to need a matching pulley to go on the motor to drive it. So the next time he came over, he brought calipers and other measuring tools and went away again and came back with, here, if I'd remembered to detach it from the thing, you would see a lovely little pulley with 3 steps, 3 or 4, 3. And a nice hole bored through the middle, all beautifully polished, all perfect angles and everything. So I looked at it and I was thinking, this is useful. And the next time he came over, I thanked him profusely and said it was totally great, only to use the lathe for boring and reaming, I was going to need some kind of block under the steady to raise it up to the center height of the bigger lathe, the center height. Okay. And how would I do that? And again, out came the measuring tools, and a little while later he came over with this, if I had it here, the lovely spacer block. It's about so by so, and it has just shaped right underneath to fit the ways of the lathe. It's beautiful. And somewhere in there, I started noticing that Dick was kind of a handsome fellow, too. And that was the essence of our rather unusual courtship. Luckily, it didn't stop quite there, as he wired up my shop and taught me a lot about acoustics, as he helped design a sound-absorbing duct for removing dust. Science in general, engineering, designing, all that, was a big common interest. Programs like NOVA, and Dick introduced me to reading science fiction. Susan mentioned that too. I ate up books by Kim Stanley Robinson, especially the Mars trilogy. It's so realistic, and the characters too, I still miss them. Dick also filled many gaps in my musical education: jazz, Motown, 12-bar blues, flamenco, and other popular styles. Still, he loved traditional music for organ or harpsichord, and Messiah always got played at Christmas time. Dick described himself to me early on as a lapsed Unitarian with Buddhist leanings. He spent part of his young teenage summers at a Unitarian camp up the east shore of Lake Michigan for the liberal religious youth, as they were then called. He credits the experience with giving him what it took to be a manager, presumably hammering out common goals while respecting and listening to all approaches and methods, something like that. Dick used to advise me against micromanaging. It took me a while to internalize what it even meant. Someday I'll learn. Yeah. Raising children was a new experience for Dick. He came up with a kind of Zen-like comment about it. It takes too long and goes by too fast. And it's really true. Dick was not normally given to expressing emotion. But another poetic comment came out when one daughter was in hospital and the three of us were setting the table for Thanksgiving. And he was quiet for a bit, and then he said, "I guess we'll be in missing man formation." That's a flight term, where you have a lead plane and the wingman, and then off the other side you have the other lead and his wingman. So it's kind of bump, bump, and bump, bump. And so you leave out the other lead position, and it's quite striking, these two, and then this way off like that. And so that was the early interpretation of what a missing man formation was. I think that's what he meant. There had been a time when Dick was taking a few flying lessons, even, and got into the history of flying as well. So many interests: photography, cycling, yoga, tennis, astronomy, there's just a few, and each one has its area on shelves in our library. There's so and so much for bicycling, and there's about this much for tennis, and astronomy is a little smaller, but anyway. Dick had varying ambitions during his life. Being a fighter pilot or a rock star might have figured early on. Later, he wondered about moving to Australia, as they surely needed someone there to help set up networking. But things evolved, and he seemed to find his best work laid out for him here, when his See You, See Me video conferencing program first got underway, and he was trying it at home. I remember the excitement in his voice when he said from his upstairs office, "Hey, you gotta come up and see this. I got somebody in New Zealand," or somewhere like that. It was indeed hard seeing someone so gifted starting to be affected by Alzheimer's. And my best takeaway for anyone wondering if it's in their future or a family member's future is to be prepared for signs of it happening years sooner than you think. And, then in that case, whatever floats your boat or theirs, just do more of it. And whatever happens, keep networking. And one more aphorism that I'm not sure if it sticks or a science fiction thing out of that Mars trilogy is so simple. Just wherever you go, there you are. Wherever you go, there you are. That's all I got.
I'm going to play a different guitar now. This is my number one guitar, the first one I ever made. So I made this in Dick's workshop with all his help and everything. So it's really, he gets the credit for this guitar coming up. So this is my #1 guitar, the first guitar I ever made in Dick's workshop. So this is a flamenco guitar. Now, Dick's first love as far as the guitar goes, he liked classical guitar, okay, I think, but he really loved flamenco guitar. And he played pretty well too. So I'm going to play a little bit of flamenco on this guitar. So flamenco, for those who don't know, it's Spanish folk music art form. It's broken down into maybe a couple dozen different forms or variations called palos, and they all have their own kind of rhythm and harmony and all that kind of thing. So one of Dick's favorite palos was called Faruca, so I'm going to play a little bit of that.
What beautiful music to come in from the cold, and you just feel like it just hugs at you. Friends, now is the time of the service where we would so invite, if you feel so moved, to come forward, if only to share a brief remembrance or just something you would like us to know about Dick, given his many, many interests. I see congregants in our midst, and I see friends from other places, so be brave. We are so enriched when we share stories. Even if we feel, well, it's just an ordinary, those are the ones that matter most. So please come forward and share a story, especially for the family that got here all the way from the Syracuse airport.
Hi, I'm John Gaines. Somebody has to start, right? So I have thought about this a good bit. I knew Dick for many, many years, and we had a very good relationship and communicated very well, but something changed in 2012. And our relationship moved in a completely different direction. Because in 2012, I bought a Miata. And that's when I found out what a car guy Dick was. Now, car guy is a general term. Do we have anybody in the audience that thinks they're a car guy? Anybody? A little tentative hands. There's some car guys out there. And then there are closet car guys. Car guy, by the way, is a generic term. It's not gender specific. I know women who are car guys and will call themselves that. It has nothing to do with the guy part. We're all guys, right? So we connected about Miatas because Dick knew so much more about Miatas than I did. And it was important that we did that. Car guys come in all kinds of varieties, just like flamenco. Car guys can race cars, they can rebuild cars, they can fix cars, they can buy and sell cars, or they can talk about cars. Dick and I, although Dick had other skills, Dick and I were car guys who talked about cars. We didn't even go look at each other's cars. We just talked about cars. But we had another connection once we got started talking, and that is British cars, particularly British roadsters. And until I read Dick's obituary, which was a wonderful obituary, I had forgotten that it was a Morgan that he owned. Now, a Morgan looks a little bit like an early MG. It's a rustic kind of looking car, but it's a little smoother and nicer, and it's sort of a rich man's MG. It was a higher end car. And I had an MGA right after we got married, and Pat and I got married, and we talked about British sports cars and their pluses and their minuses. The big minus always being Lucas and what we call the Lucas evil empire. Some people are smiling, you know about it. And it has nothing to do with George Lucas and Star Wars. It has to do with the fact that almost every British car made in the 50s through probably the 70s was plagued by a Lucas electrical system that you could count on failing when you needed it the most. So if you get together with the car guys who own cars in those vintage, Alfa Romeo even, it wasn't just British cars, you would find people talking about Lucas, and boy, are things much better now. And that's what we decided about Miatas. They're not the fanciest car in the world, they weren't meant to be, but they were very drivable. But Dick and I had some differences about Miatas. One is that at one point, Dick owned two Miatas, his purple one and his blue one. I only ever owned one. The other one being, as you heard Fred say in Fred's remarks, Dick drove his all year. Dick was a firm believer in Blizzak snow tires, which were originally Firestones and now are Bridgestones, and you can still buy Blizzaks. I had a Prius with Blizzaks on them, but Dick argued strongly for Blizzaks. You know, car guys have these things that they latch on to. But we did agree that the Miatas were a very reasonable sports car at a very reasonable price, and you could have a lot of fun with them. Now, I have to step back and say, Dick was a real car guy, and I was a wannabe car guy, because Dick could do something I could not do. He could heel and toe. Heel and toe with. We have a few people. Good. Heel and toe quickly is a method of downshifting in a stick shift car, what would previously used to be called a standard transmission. We don't call it that anymore because the automatic is now standard. But it's a technique of downshifting quickly using 2 feet on 3 pedals. So you're doing clutch, brake, and accelerator simultaneously. Dick could do that, I never could. And he used to talk about how much fun the Miata was because he could heel and toe it. So that made him a real car guy. I miss our conversations. I do get to see one of Dick's cars, which is, and it's actually, Fred didn't mention this, but it's 3rd generation car that Fred has in the Unitarian Church, because it was bought brand new by Betty Ween, and then Chris Ween sold it to Dick, and then Mary sold it to Fred Balfour. So the same Miata has now been in 3 families in this church. I will really miss my conversations with Dick. and I'm really glad to have known him.
Hi, I'm Jane Cogger. I'm Dick's daughter. I just wanted to say a couple things about him. He had a really great sense of humor. He could convey a lot with just a look, whether it was sarcasm or some kind of look of incredulity at some girlhood flight of fancy that me or my sister was taking. He also had a lot of, some people have talked about his kind of way of using aphorisms and things like that. He was good at coming up with them. He was good at using them. One I remember him using was one time when I think that me and my sister were kind of ganging up on our parents at the dinner table. In some manner, he said, "Me against my brother, me and my brother against my parents, me and my family against my neighbors, me and my neighbors against the town." And so it kind of like extends like that, with you always having allegiance to the people closest to you. He also had very high standards. For himself and the people around him. There was one time when I got a bad grade on a test, which was pretty unusual, and I remember him, he didn't always say a lot, but sometimes he had a way of conveying what he thought, and he plopped this stack of papers down next to me, and I guess he had printed out the average GPA of admission for every college in the country. And people have talked about how he was a great teacher, and I agree with that, although there were some arguments for sure learning how to drive. I think that's pretty common. But that is for one thing that I take for granted is knowing things like how to heel and toe. I know the best routes around town, even before GPS, because he had painstakingly timed every route to everywhere on his watch. So I knew all the back routes, all the ways around traffic and everything. He taught me a few of those things that are just really nice to know, like how to shuffle cards, how to play chess. Yeah, he was great. I'll miss him. Wish we had more time.
David Sibley. We live, Roberta and I moved to Ithaca in 2010 and on to Dove Drive where the Dick and Marion, Jane and Sky live. And I have a little story of Dick's generosity. I've been a guitar player for a while. And I had an idea for a kind of a hybrid, sort of a strange-looking guitar, you know. Our neighborhood picnics every year, you know, folks would come and bring potluck, and I'd get to talking to Dick, and I found out that he had this guitar shop. And at some point there, back around 2018, I was thinking, you know, maybe I'll just talk to him about this idea, you know. So I went over, you know, called him up, went over, and told him my concept and my idea, and he said, "Well, why don't you try to make it in my shop?" You know, and like I was like, whoa. So I actually gave me a key to the shop, and I spent a number of months trying to make this thing, which actually never came to fruition, but I'd be down in the shop and, you know, cutting wood or sanding or doing some task, and sort of get stuck on something. So I'd get the phone, call him up and say, hey Dick, can you help me with something? He'd come down the stairs and sort of point me in the right direction and go back up, and then, a couple hours later, I'd go call him up and say, okay, Dick, I got another question for you. And he was just so generous with his time and his knowledge, and I was really happy to get to know him as a person then too. His just sort of this quiet demeanor, but just a walking encyclopedia of particularly guitar making knowledge, but all kinds of other stuff. So I was very grateful to have known him before he began to suffer with Alzheimer's. He was a delight. His company was, and Mary too, we had dinner with them a number of times, and it's been a pleasure to know the family. So I think of him. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Larry Chase. Dick hired me to work at Cornell on the last day of 1976. I just realized he and I have exactly the same initials. Not that that's really significant. Over the years, I've worked in several different groups that Dick managed, always exceedingly interesting stuff. And I think over that time, I heard him say something, and if he didn't say it, it still applies. Anything worth doing is worth overdoing. That's Dick.
Hi, my name's Diana Sinton. My husband Chris and I moved to Ithaca in 2011, right next to Mary Paul and Dick, so they're close next door neighbors. And one of the first time I got to know Dick was when it was summertime. We was mowing lawn time, and he and Mary mow their lawn with a rider mower, which is held together with a lot of wonderful duct tape and ropes and things, but works really, really well. And their yard is kind of hilly, so he was always the mower of the family then, and he could steer that thing around everywhere. And we, all of our yards on that side of Dove, just, there aren't really fences, so kind of have to decide where's the edge, where's he gonna stop mowing, where's our edge, where's his edge. He was always super generous. He tended to come a little bit on our side, but he wouldn't go into our yard. At some point, I asked him whether I could try using their rider mower, because Chris and I pushed the gas one. And he said, oh, okay, you can try. And he hesitated because he has that, he wants to teach you, but he's a perfectionist. He wants you to use the machine well. And it's got, Mary Paul now trusts me she's taught me so many times, now I can actually get it and not stall and do all sorts of things with it. But I remember Dick watched me for a minute, and then he was like, no, it's okay, I'm just gonna do it for you. So several times he would come and mow our entire backyard. And he did it really well and really fast. One of my favorite stories, this was probably 2017-ish. We often would come over and borrow quick little things from them, and but maybe vice versa. I was moving some furniture around in our, we have this one cabinet, it fits into a corner. It kind of has an odd triangular shape with some extra flat sides. So it was a weird, unusual shape. And I was moving it from one place to another, and I wanted to add another shelf. The whole thing has doors, so you can't see the shelves at all. They're all inside behind these covered doors. But it had plenty of pegs to add more shelves, but I needed a shelf, which means I needed a piece of largish wood, bigger than anything we would have had at our house. And then I had to measure out, it's kind of like if you were measuring something around the side of this floor. I sketched on a piece of paper, I knew the dimensions I needed, and all I was gonna do, it was gonna be behind closed doors. No one's ever gonna see this thing. I just needed to go over and see if they had a big piece of wood that I could then mark out and, hacksaw it, whatever. I would somehow get it cut. And when I went over there, Mary Paul wasn't there, Dick was there, and I told him what I needed, and he just kind of sat there and thought about it for a little while. He said, yeah, we've got wood like that. So I explained, and it was confusing and a little, like, he didn't really appreciate the fact that I was just gonna, like, saw it, hacksaw it, whatever. I didn't care what it looked like. While we were down there, he was getting pieces of wood. If you've ever been to their basement, it's, of course, phenomenal, lots of wood. They had plenty of pieces that were large enough. Mary Paul came home right at that time, and then they basically, and to end the story short, by the time I left there, maybe 90 minutes later, I had the most wonderful, they turned on their machines. It involved multiple machines, multiple table saws, multiple things. The edges are smooth, kind of beveled. I mean, the whole thing is just the most beautiful interior cabinet shelf I could ever have. And it's just, that generosity with high standards and just that wanting to do it well and wanting to help neighbors. We're very happy to have moved to that little corner of Dove Drive.
Can people hear me? Joan Winters. I've known Dick since about 1971 in many roles and guises, and there are too many stories to tell. But basically, we were drawn together, I think, by his curiosity, his rigor, his perfectionism, which caused problems from time to time. But nonetheless, I appreciated his thoroughness and diverse knowledge. I'll just say, I worked for a group in computing center at Cornell called Academic Services, and we were forcibly merged into Dick's systems group in 1972. And one of the things I remember from early on then is Dick called us together for a meeting. And he said, it's really important, to work hard and whatever, and work on our improving central computing at Cornell, whatever. And then he said, but it's also very important that you spend some time each week on things that particularly interest you and talk to your creativity. I can't remember exactly, but it was, like half a day. It was a significant amount of time. And I really appreciated that. But another thing I remember is I give an annual house party over on Cogger Lake at the family cottage. And Dick's been coming since early 70s, mid 70s. And I moved to California, Stanford Linear Accelerator Center in 1980. And I, with help from Mary Ann, who's here, kept the house party going before there was the internet, which was really quite tricky. But anyway, Dick said, you have to have something special about your house party to keep people interested. So he said, you have to have a roast. And he created a spit and a handle and brought it to the cottage and insisted, and then I got a roast at a local meat specialty small grocery store called Morgan's. And every year for many years, we had a rotating roast and Dick would sort of manage it. He didn't necessarily rotate it, and we had to have different people sharing in the rotating role. But it was a delicious roast, and people got to enjoy it. It died several years ago. We all got older, or most of us did. And third thing I'll mention is Dick, you know, as people have said, is interested in a zillion different things and is very rigorous about learning about a zillion different things. And I was in California, and I think as Susan mentioned, he would come visit me and stay on my guest cot in California when he was going out and lobbying places like Apple. They really had to connect with the internet, you understand, because they weren't originally going to be doing that. And then See You, See Me. So I learned a whole lot about that, and through that I brought See You, See Me to Slack, and we were involved, or I was involved in an early demo around the world. Somebody alluded to, or talked about that too. So it was very thrilling to be talking to people at Cornell. I was at Slack, and we had somebody else, I think a school room in New Zealand. It was just very exciting. So I learned a zillion things from him, and hopefully we stimulated each other to some extent. And as somebody else said, I'll miss his conversations. I am missing his conversation and his friendship. Excuse me, I want to make sure I get over this wire.
I could just add a little PS to that, which is that that very spit is in a photograph, which I believe we put on one of the poster board things, which you'll find out there somewhere. So there's a couple of people standing on the sides, and one person doing this, and I think we have pieces of it in our workshop. I think I remember sort of picking something up and saying to Dick, "Isn't this a piece of that?" And he was like, "Yeah, maybe." It wasn't too long ago. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Ken Ridley. You can tell a lot about someone by how they behave on a tennis court. And Dick was always a gentleman. He was a perfectionist, though. And if he missed 3 shots in a row, didn't usually happen, he would get very upset with himself. And his face would get red, veins pop out, and he would go, "Golly." It was adorable.
That's great. Please rise as you're able. Grab the teal hymnal in front of you for number 1064, a real favorite in this world. Blue Boat Home, more important than ever.
I feel
As we near the conclusion of our formal gathering after the postlude, I hope you'll stay to enjoy some refreshments and each other's company as you continue to share and reminisce and celebrate Dick's life. We have shaped this service to include music that Dick and Mary Paul loved. And thank you all for singing those hymns with such affection. My friends, when one remembers a loss, that opening becomes a gateway to all losses and grievances that rest beneath the surface of our lives. How we truly honor our departed loved ones, how we pay tribute to them all. Indeed, how we stretch within our souls to give farewell again and again, there in the midst of that opening of our heart to the grief. There too we encounter a love for a life that mattered and will continue to matter in our shared memories. I pray this will be so. I love these words in extinguishing our chalice I found from a Unitarian Universalist by the name of Adam Slate. It seems especially appropriate right now with all of what we're living through. It's simple. Be kind, be brave, be just, be merciful, be hopeful. This is how we keep this chalice flame burning until we are together again to light it anew. Blessed be.